maybe a little bit further down, but as long as it's not going to affect the recording.
Yeah, I would even, yeah, give me a still. Bring it
At
down a
this
little
point,
bit.
I'm physically moving the microphone further away.
Yeah. I wonder if I wonder, because it's like a blue, right? Or a thingamabob?
That's a Yeti, yeah.
Yeah, a Yeti. They're
Yeah,
very
and I've
powerful.
been using the, yeah.
It's the we can hear you no matter where in the universe you are microphone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So I'm live now, and I would like to have the link. Give me the link in the basic info. And then we will, what the hey, tweet it live.
Actually, go. There.
Why
Is
on
that
earth?
any better?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, yeah, that I have input levels that I can control locally, so
There we go.
hooray for settings.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'll just tweet it out, and then we'll start.
Okay.
Hey, before we tweet it out, anything you don't want me to say online about live about you?
Not me. I'm an open book.
Everybody's clear. All right, good.
How long is the show again?
It would probably be a little bit less than a half hour.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I got confirmation you're allowed to say that I work for Disney, but I do not speak for Disney or really anyone other than me.
And I'm not going to ask you any questions that are like
Probing.
Disney centric.
Yeah.
But the Skype wasn't behaving. Now you could go here if you wanted.
Both of y'all are in California?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down here in
Where are you?
sunny New Orleans. As you can see, it's
Let me just double check that the link I'm sending is the right one, because boy, does that suck when you're wrong.
I'm about 2 miles from the French Quarter, mile and a half or so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
New Orleans is always more fun after dark anyways, right?
Pretty much. There's no last call, so it's kind of always after dark here.
That's true.
All right, so we are live, and I am recording, and everyone sounds really good, so let me just get the rundown up, and we'll be ready to go. And you guys don't need the rundown because it's literally like me being script, and so all I'm going to do is like talk for a little while, and then ask you questions, and you answer them honestly, and then we end. I have a couple things to say about last month's episode about Windows, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm excited. So I'm not going to play any music because I wasn't expected to be live, but everybody in their heads can just like bounce their head to the Daily Tech News Show theme song. And then we'll just start. So in 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, it's Jenny Josephson, and welcome back to what we here are calling the Daily Tech Normie Show. Conversations with our amazing Daily Tech News Show audience and their friends, brothers, and coworkers, all about things that I, Jenny the Tech Normie, kinda, sorta, but don't really understand. And one thing I finally learned not that long ago is that it's always better to step up and admit when you don't know something, because it's a really good way to keep learning. And I have to say that's a lot easier to do at almost a little bit 40 rather than 21, because when you're 21 you're like, I should know everything, and that's not true. So on the last show I asked for your help migrating from Mac to Windows as part of my new job, and boy did I get great responses from all of you, and I'm super excited to get to that a little later in the show. But I'm really excited about today's show because once again, it hits on the things that I've encountered all through my career. And it goes something like this, and I have it in the rundown in all caps, but I'm not going to say it in all caps. I'm going to say it normally. How do normies talk to developers, that is web, software, front-end, back-end developers, without pissing them off? How do us mere mortals, those of us who started in logo and never went any further, convey our super creative desires to hardworking, usually understaffed developers in a way that makes a project go forward and not down the toilet? So, with me today, we put the call out on the analyst call, and through those magical circles, we got people volunteering right away, and some people couldn't do it. Some people were in the UK and couldn't do it because it's like 3 in the morning there. But we ended up with 2 great guys who are on the show today, David Still and David Brooks. That's right, they're the Devids. So hi guys, welcome to the Daily Tech Normie Show. How you doing?
We're good. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This came about in a perfect way. A little bit about these fine gentlemen. David Still is a web developer who's worked for some pretty serious companies, pretty serious fun. He's worked for Comedy Central, on The Daily Show and Colbert and Spike. He's done GameTrailers.com, Mazda, Toyota, and his favorite, Atom.com, ATOM. And now he is working as a web developer for Disney. So that's pretty awesome. And he drove all the way across town to get home in time to do this. So I'm super grateful and thanks for being here. um, and
My
then
pleasure.
uh, and then David Brooks is here, and we found David Brooks through his brother Brian, who is a big fan of all the shows in this little universe. And I just asked him a little bit about himself because we hadn't met before this. And it turns out he started programming at the age of 9 in QBasic. His love of tech was instilled by his brother and his family. He started studying Pascal, C, C++, college. In college, he was doing Java assembly, PHP, Perl, computer science, and then here's where it got like super cool: bioinformatics, which is, tell me again, David Brooks, what that is.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of applying technology to studying medical science. And what we were specifically looking at was protein folding. Uh,
Wow,
I
that's
can,
yeah. I'm sure you tell in a couple sentences, tell our audience, because even though I will sit here and go, oh my God, what's that? They might know, so go for it.
so protein folding is studying proteins on the atomic structure. And so if we look at proteins, they're all made up of organic compounds. Those are all molecules. Those are all atoms. They're all made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? And we talk about proteins, we're talking about amino acids. We're talking about amino acid strings. And that's the primary structure of a protein. We talk about the secondary structure. So we talk about, does it have loops? Does it have sheets? Does it have helixes in this? And when we're trying to study these structures, we're trying to understand how it interacts with other parts of your body, how it interacts with medicine, and how it affects our medical, health overall. And the reason we're trying to do this through technology is because proteins can be really, really complicated on the atomic structure. So trying to do this in a lab is possible, but it could be very expensive and very time-consuming. And with over 20,000 different types of proteins in our bodies, it's unrealistic to be able to do it in a lab in a timely fashion. So we're trying to design computer models to predict from that amino acid structure, which is relatively easy to determine in the lab, and predict that secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structure, which will help us actually understand how these proteins interact.
Oh my God. I feel so basic right now.
The, the,
But
the
that's
first time my professor told me, like, I asked him, my first day of class, my freshman year, what do you do? He says, I study bioinformatics. I'm like, does that mean you study organic computers? And he's like, no, come to my office after class and I'll tell you. And he
uh,
gave me this 30-minute introduction and whoosh. But
your mind just unfolded.
yeah,
So you work now for a company called Insignia Tech, and that is basically a place that works with other companies, governments, on sysadmins, security engineering, software code reviews, pretty much anything if you need a concept brought from idea to real world enterprise product at the highest level. Would that be just about correct?
that's correct.
Okay. And essentially, David, still, you do the front end stuff, maybe some back end too, for entertainment companies. So I feel like we have this incredibly perfect um, sort of perspective, two different perspectives to go into all of my dumb questions. Anything you want to add that I didn't add, David, still, about what you're doing these days?
Sure. Like you said, I've done a lot of websites, for, user-facing websites that you see on the internet. Uh, what I'm doing these days is more internal tools. So I am still developing user interface type things, but more for web applications.
Got it.
Yeah, but I do, and it's all web-based. What I'm
Okay.
doing.
Okay, great. So we have
Not nearly as complex as folding molecules.
But hey, you helped do that for Daily Show and Colbert, so that has pretty high cool value. I'll tell you what, you guys are both. This is great. Okay, so let me get back to my rundown here. First, as we delve into DevLand, I would like to get some definitions. So you guys sort of touched on this, but I want the really simplest definition of David Still. What is a web developer?
A web developer takes the idea of a web page and actually builds the pieces. If you have a team, you've got designers, and you have developers typically, and sometimes on smaller projects, your developer may also be a designer. But when you're talking about developers, you're talking about the people who actually build the websites and the code behind it.
Okay. And so, David Brooks, tell me, what is a software developer, backend developer, what you do, what your company does, and how would you describe the difference between the two?
So the front-end developers and the back-end developers definitely have to work together. So as David Still said, the front-end developers take that concept for what the end users see and turn that into a living, breathing web page. But that typically means it's a more complex application in today's, modern web environment. So we're not just having simple web presences anymore. We're having things like Amazon, things like Google, which require a whole lot of back-end technology. And part of that might mean a database. Part of that might mean when you type into a text box, such as in google.com, it comes up with those search results, those suggested answers. And so there's really something behind the scenes that's happening. And so you type into that text box, it sends something back to a server. That server says, oh, David typed in, these words. A lot of other people typed in these words. I need to send a response back and fill in that front end, which David Still helped make. And so it's taking not just the front end presentation, but it's taking the more complex back end thinking, more complex back end technology that has to happen to make all these extra bells and whistles become a reality.
Got it. Okay, great. So I basically have the two perfect people to be on this show. And how much would you say each of you, and jump in whoever wants to, how much would you say of your job is client facing, whether that's an outside client like a company or internal, say in a large company, some department comes to you and says, I want a sound quiz?
I would say pretty much all of my job is client facing.
Okay.
As when I work with other developers, as front-end developers, I see them as a client. They're an internal client because I owe them something. I owe them some kind of code. I owe them some kind of review. I owe them something. When I'm dealing with customers directly, they say, David, we need this functionality of some sort. I'm working with them directly. When I'm doing some kind of security review with software developers with their code, they're another client. So it's, from my perspective, it's almost all client interactions.
Got it. And David Still, how about you? Who's your typical client in any one of your jobs, not specifically your current job?
Sure. I would say somewhere between, anywhere between 30 and 50%. Okay. Like other David said, you can also think of your fellow developers as clients, but there is a certain amount of time that you do spend, or that I spend by myself just coding. But I do think that the more important part of the job is the client interface, and that is, it's also some of the more challenging aspects. Not that people are difficult or anything like that. It's just that I have to know what they want, and they have to know what I'm saying. And
right.
What I'm saying sometimes can be difficult.
Right. And so this is where I come into the picture. I am your typical normie. Maybe a little less than typical because I've always sort of skated along the shallow end of the pond that is technology, which is to say I am an enthusiastic end user of any product, whether it's a mobile product, a mobile app, a computer, whatever. Like, I'm into it. I want to know all the tricks. I want to know all the tips. The most I will ever do in my life is make a WordPress page, very likely. Unless they start making apps that you can build with Legos, which I guess 13-year-olds are doing in Minecraft. So,
I was
or
about to say, yeah.
they're fine. But I
That
work,
sounds like Squarespace to me.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I represent the best possible normie you're ever gonna get, because I like really smart developers and IT people. Obviously, having spent 2 years at the Daily Tech News Show, they're our audience, right? I will listen to you. And yet still, I sometimes find myself across all my jobs not able to communicate perfectly with the people who are so very necessary to everything that I want to accomplish. So let's get specific here for a second. Let's say I've got a job, right? Where my job is to dream up products of some kind that will, in the mostly hopeless fight against, let's say, Facebook, which is taking all publisher traffic and just clonking it into its own pages, right? And then that's their battle, and all we are is their little serfs farming their fields. But we still have an idea that we think on our website, say like funnymoney.com, right? That covers the funny ways people spend money. Uh, uh, I come up with an idea that I think will drive people to the site instead of like go find us on Facebook or the traditional, whatever the traditional communication medium is of that site. But to do that, I have to work with either a team of developers or one super exhausted developer in order to implement this thing. So let's the three of us make up a product that the producer would be like, I think this is a great idea to bring people to our site, to keep them there, and then how do I begin to communicate it? So what would be like a good example of like a web product, like a game or something to bring people to the site?
Well, I mean, when we're starting from this point, I think we need to talk general and what does it mean to bring people to the site and why do people keep coming back? And as you alluded to with Facebook, that's content. And it's if I go to if I have a regular book, I'm not going to keep reading it over and over because the reread value keeps going down. And it's the same thing with websites. There has to be some change in content, something new, something exciting, something driving eyeballs, something making us want to come.
Right.
Over and over, to this
And
website.
engage in a really strong way, right? So you really are going to want like something like all right, so say I have funnymoney.com. What if we were going to build like a Sim City but for spending money? Right, which I guess SimCity is too, but like, what we're going to build our own branded version of a SimCity or a Monopoly or something on our own site that I would get people to engage in. I would get them to sign up with their email so that I would be able to communicate with them. I would want them to be spending time on my site and interacting with it in some way. So let's just call it Funny Monopoly, for lack of a better product, right? And
Okay.
I walked down. Yes, go ahead.
So we need to divide this conversation up into two different parts, I suppose. One, there's the game
Excellent.
design, and
Okay.
another one, there's the technology.
Okay.
And so the technology, if we're going to talk about presenting a web interface, we'd maybe use WebGL because that can give us a full AAA graphics experience. We can have graphics built into that. We'd be using JavaScript. We'd have plenty of front-end work, plenty of graphic design work, plenty of story creation, plenty of game concepts. And if we're going to start out this project, we need to kind of walk through that as a team, as equals, and say, well, what do we believe is going to be a successful game to make people want to play it? And two, what is actually realistically achievable in our timeline, our human power resources, and our money?
And also what our site
Right.
can manage, right? Like, what if we're not much better than a Squarespace or a WordPress? Like, what if we're not in a really heavy... I mean, you could do almost anything with those, I guess, but I wouldn't even know. So, all right. So I've walked down the hallway in our
Well,
fictional office, right? we're gonna paint the picture for the folks at home. I've walked down the office, my cheerful producer walk. I'm saying hi to people in the hallway. I come to you guys. I'm like, guys, I have this great idea for Monopoly money. And then David, number one, says what he just said to me, and I look at David number two and I say, I don't understand. Where do we go from here?
Well, in my experience, the best thing to do is just sit down and figure out, okay, what is it we're building? You've got this great idea for a game. Okay, let's sit down and map out how it works. And this can be for any kind of site too. And if you are trying to sell soap, same thing. How does this work? How do you see this working? And at the very basic level, you can start spitballing with bullet points, and eventually that starts to form into a flow chart.
Okay.
So where does the person enter the site? Mm-hmm. How can they go through it? How can they interact with it? What comes back from the server? How does this need to work?
Okay. So, and that's something that as a storyteller, right, if I'm a producer and my job is to tell stories, I could sit down, if you gave me, one of those they use them in movies all the time, like comic book panels.
Storyboard.
Right? Storyboard, thank you. So I could sit down with a storyboard page and actually tell you the story of this game, right? As a little normie producer and step it out for what I wanted to happen, what the options were I wanted to happen in a very simple web-based game, right? We're not building Fallout 4 here. And what is the messaging, right, that I want for our potential funny money company to be able to pass along? Is it like informational? Like I want people to learn something? Do I want them to be able to go from $100 that they inherited from their grandma to $1 billion company? Like, what are the goals? Like, what's the end? What's the winning? What's the losing? In essence, the way that I've always understood it is like I would be writing a choose your own adventure book. Is that somewhat correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel confident with that. I go back, I sit at my desk, I put on some music, and I design this thing out. And then maybe like a day or two later, I've talked to my boss, we've put all this stuff together. I walk down the hall and I hand it to you. And then what from there is the best way for me to communicate what I need and when? And knowing, of course, that there are like 7 other huge things on both of your plates. You guys are all working for multiple departments. They all have multiple priorities. And I am just one of them, and maybe not even the most important. What about me, and not me personally, but what could I as a normie do to make this project something you guys actually want to work on and can work on?
So there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. If I'm an overworked developer and you're not, as you put it, you're not at the top and you're giving me a project that's not necessarily the most important for the company or what I should be doing as the highest priority, you might want to work with management. I could, if you come at me with this and I say, well, internally I say, well, I don't want to let you down, but right. I also have these other priorities that higher management has given me. So that might add stress to me. That might create conflict between us, and that's something we want to avoid. And trying to think of software development not as I have this great idea, I'm going to go to this lone developer and try to make it happen, but try to think of it as a team sport. Try to think of it, we're not building software, we're building society. We're building the systems that we're all using. For instance, Google Hangouts, our computers, everything we're doing is making all of this possible. And if we did it all of it in a haphazard way, none of it would work. So imagine we're building a bridge, and it's all that important, and we have to have that kind of dedication to it. And if we don't, we're going to let something slip, we'll forget to put a bolt in, the bridge will fall down, and it'll end in tears. And so this proper this proper workflow, this proper way of assigning, this proper way of managing projects, I think is the key to avoiding these kind of conflicts, is the key to avoiding these scheduling conflicts, and to actually having projects more often come to fruition instead of ending because we didn't have realistic priorities or we didn't have realistic expectations.
Okay, David, still, do you have anything to add to this bridge building episode here? Nope, did I lose David? No, something froze for a second. Hello.
I see his videos.
Okay, so he froze. So
Yeah.
he's thinking right now. David still is in a meeting with a senior director, so he will have to come back in a moment and talk to us. Okay, so we've got. Let's say that my project has the backing of management, right? It's a good, fun product. It's something nobody's thought of before, and I've got a little bit of heat behind my idea.
Okay.
And so still, I know that you guys have like website updates. You have to make sure the security, like you've got security updates to do. So even though my project has some backing, there are still actual daily priorities that are going on that will have to be factored in. So what would you then, we now have like backing, we now have something of a plan. What is the next thing you would tell me?
Okay, so let me go ahead and take my programmer hat off and put on my project manager hat here.
Okay.
So what we're really talking about is managing time and making sure our projects get to where we want, when we want, at budget, without, driving our developers to quit. Right. And so what that really means is seeing the whole process as a pipeline, and seeing, what is the task assigned to David? How does this affect his task? How does each task cascade down the row? And how do we prioritize, for budgets and everything else?
Okay, I'm typing to
So,
our boss in the other meeting. Hold on.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I wrote him. He's in a meeting with the director. He'll be back. Okay, so project management. So we have to establish a timeline, right?
Right. So you're coming at me with these awesome ideas for this video game, and I'm sitting here as a project manager saying, well, we need to make some graphics. That means we have to get our artists, assigned to make graphics for the game. We're going to need some kind of way to display these graphics onto the website and onto the screen. And that means we need a programmer to make or use or re-implement a graphics engine. We need to have a front-end user interface. So that means we need to have someone design what are the game players going to click? What are they going to be interacting with? What does that look like and how does that feel? We'll need some sound designers. So when a player clicks on a building in our sim game, does it make, let's say it's City Hall, does it make the sound of papers rustling because, City Halls are endless paper shoot?
Right.
What are we thinking about with all of the different assets that we need to make this game a reality? And when we think about that, we can say, well, we need these people with these skills, and this is about the amount of time it's going to take to do it. And that, from that basic image that you've given me from the storyboard, we can make a more technical, high-level view of what this game is going to be. And then once we move from there, we can say, okay, graphics artist, we've estimated that it'll take you 40 hours to make these pieces of art for this project. What do you think? How does it fit in with your current priorities and your current task? Are we close? Are we far off? Let's try to bring this all together.
Okay, so and then I say to you, it's June 15th. Any chance this could be ready for Comic-Con, which is in July? What is your reaction?
With an infinite budget?
And we say no.
Welcome back from the other meeting. So you're right. You just said it, with an infinite budget. But let's call ourselves a mid-range, profitable but not a Facebook, not a Google content company, right? We have budget, but we ain't Facebook. And it's probably, let's just say for simplicity's sake, it is one person per assigned role.
No, definitely not. If we're looking at it, if we're looking at a month and we have one person doing everything from programming to graphics to project management to sound.
Well, I'm thinking one person per job. One person per job that you said. So a team, but just one, like for.
Well, this is where a project manager really helps out.
Right.
And if you have a project manager, which if you've got one person per job, chances are you've also probably have a project manager who's going to help coordinate their efforts and also help speak to you.
Okay.
And
And
so,
keep me away from you guys, in a way, right?
well, and help figure out, okay, what are the realistic milestones? If we know going into it, okay, we need to have something ready by Comic-Con, then we can adjust priorities accordingly, and maybe we can't have the entire game up and running, but maybe we can have a little 3-minute demo or just a clip reel to show.
Something to show the bosses.
Right.
Proof of concept for all the money that they have just spent. Okay.
Right. Something can be produced. We just have to know what it is to make sure it's realistic.
Right. And someone would probably at some point ask me, Jenny, now everybody on the content side has signed off on this, right? Because I've seen that happen before at Yahoo, and I'll just say it, that's where I used to work. Like, somebody comes and has an idea and gets the team all excited, and then some other person would come in and be like, wait a second, I have a whole different idea, and like all hell breaks loose. I mean, I'm sure that happens all the time.
Yeah, it's called scope creep.
Yes.
What's it called again?
Scope creep.
Scope creep.
Scope creep. That is a wonderful name for a character on a TV show. And that is something that I bet causes a lot of loud music to be played and a lot of punching.
The most insidious villain ever to grace the screen, at least our own developer laptop screens.
I like it. I like it a lot.
And scope creep actually appears in a whole lot of places and a whole lot of time, because think about it, if we're building a bridge and we're building a bridge with 4 lanes, and then we suddenly decide halfway through that we wanted it to be 6 lanes, and then when we get 90% through, we just suddenly decided that we really wanted 2 lanes. It's kind of a lot of work to take apart that bridge and keep changing it and rebuilding it.
Yeah.
And software is,
a lot all over again, right?
Yeah, and software is the same. When you build it, you're building very complex systems of code and databases and back-end systems and front-end systems, and changing it is usually not very easy or very quick process.
Okay, so now here's my final question in this building of this game. What should I, the normie, absolutely not, under any circumstances, do or say to you guys, Mr. Frontend, Mr. Backend? What is the worst possible thing that I can say or do or behave to you?
David, I'll let you go first on this one.
Let's see. I know we said 3 weeks, but can we have it next week?
Okay. All right, I'm keeping a list.
Changing deadlines is difficult.
Right, and we're going to add scope creep to that list.
Scope creep.
Right.
And scope creep is part of that. Scope creep is probably the biggest one, because then it's and here's one reason why scope creep can be so insidious, because someone can have this great idea and go, oh, I don't think this is going to be very difficult to do this, and it would make the product so much better, so why don't we see if we can just do this?
Right.
And that may even come from me, right? Yeah, as the front-end developer, I go, oh, you know what? If I could get this API from the back end, we could do so much cool stuff on the front end. And, I bet this isn't going to take much. And then David B. comes back and say, you want what?
Oh, right.
You want
and
what?
that is scope creep. And that's...
and it can come not just from me, but from all sides.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's a really good thing for me to know. Now, David Brooks, do you have anything to add to our 2.5 long list of things I should absolutely not do in this situation?
I guess I can refer to things that have happened to me or things that people have done to me in the past.
Yeah.
Very demoralizing when management comes in who is not technical and they're leading a project, and they say we want X, Y, and Z by a certain time, and then it's part of scope creep, and then they come in and say, well, why the hell were you working on X, Y, and Z? And we're like, well, boss, you told me to. And like, no, I didn't. I wanted you to work on A, B, and C. And that's even worse than scope creep. That's completely missing the communication. And for all of this to work, it has to be we have to communicate the vision, what we want, what we need, and when. And that means removing egos. If the boss had made a mistake, he really needs to own up to that. If we make a mistake as developers, we have to own up to that. And pushing it off onto each other is horrible. It destroys teams, it destroys cohesion, and it destroys projects. I've had managers, or vice presidents, at companies I've worked for, see people from IT and throw pencils and stuff across the room because they're so upset about some project that maybe this 5,000 person company was working on that I have nothing to do with, but they see I'm in IT and they take it out on me. So this kind of not working as a team, I guess, is my biggest general way of destroying a project and destroying team morale. And respect each other, treat each other as you want to be treated, and really think through your visions and try to understand what your actions, what your inactions do and don't do to your other team members.
So basic human kindness.
Yeah, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, jump right in.
So and I'm going to agree with David on that, and go a step further and say the biggest way to solve almost all these problems is communication.
Yeah.
And if you come in with great ideas and say, you know what, this would be awesome if we could do this, and we go, this is why this isn't going to work. But also on us, like your developers can help you find ways to make things work. Right. If you're willing to communicate and work, like maybe we can do this, but that means this other thing falls off, and that's a two-way communication. And the best projects that I've worked on have always had great communication. That I've worked closely with the stakeholders, the people who are going to be using the product or benefiting from it, to the management of the project, down to the other developers. And if you have good communication, and that's speaking and listening, and your developers have good communication, we have to articulate what we can do and can't do, and talk to you about it as well, then your project can go smoothly. Even if it gets hectic, hopefully it won't go off the rails.
Right. And I would add one more thing to that, as someone who has learned this the hard way in marriage, is credit is really important.
Yes.
So when our game finally comes out and it's on the site and it's a huge success and we're all ecstatic and people are using it, they're loving it, they're tweeting about it, and they're doing write-ups on TechCrunch about it, we're all great. What really sucks is when a senior manager or someone goes out and said, yep, this was all my idea, I developed it, I got those people working and they did it for me and blah blah blah, and ain't I the greatest, and I'll be accepting my crunchy now. Right? And that is not good, not on any side. And I feel like lucky to have always worked in companies, whether it's on the creative side or a little bit more in a bridge role, where that never happens. Like you name people, you thank people, you give them their moment in the sun or their week off or whatever it is, but like simple human acknowledgement of hard work goes forever. Which is what I would take away from this. So my dream for this episode, and this episode has like surpassed my wildest dreams already, but my entire dream was to call it 3 Devs and a Normie. And you'll notice there's only 2 devs here, but like any good producer, I have a solution. I want to read this note that Alistair Smith, who is Ali or 40 Thieves in chat, he couldn't make it to the episode today because he's in the UK and it's very late there, very early. So he sent me this email, and I think it goes well at the end of our discussion because it's about what happens next. 40 Thieves, Ali says, my best advice for normies working with web developers is to learn how to give a good bug report. I have wasted days hunting to find a reported bug only to find out that I'm looking in the wrong place. The most important part is the detail. Give as much detail about how you found the bug and even if possible the steps you took to get to that point. This allows us to reproduce the bug and test our theories about how it's happening. It's very rare for me to know and be able to fix the problem before investigating. It's also useful to hear your expected and actual behavior of the bug. Sometimes what you think is a bug might actually be a feature, which I feel like now I've heard everywhere, but I always love. Or at least a usability issue where the way in which you're using it is unexpected. TLDR, steps to reproduce, expected behavior, actual behavior, a little bit of work to describe the problem really helps us solve it quickly. And I would imagine I'm seeing some nodding heads and smiling faces here in the chat.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now we have
Spot on.
tracked in yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that was spot on.
Yeah. So good job, 40 Thieves. Thank you for being our third dev with the Normie. Okay, so real quick, I just want to blast through, and guys, feel free to chime in anytime. But in last month's episode, I talked about my progress from many years of being on a Mac to moving to Windows. And I just wanted to thank everybody who wrote in and just tell a couple things about what they sent me and how it has helped. So I'm going to try to blast through this real fast because we had a great conversation. But if you hear something you like, jump in. So Kome wrote me. He has a great suggestion about remapping commands to various keys so that the functions are the same across Mac and Windows. And he gave me some steps to do that. I have to try that when I have a clear headspace because I'm a little nervous about it. But someday when I don't have a lot to do, that's the one I'm going to do. Joe Yuong had a great suggestion, which is so simple, but sometimes when you're on a different computer, you're like, mine does not compute. He was like, just use the cloud. Don't worry about Microsoft Office and iCloud and all this stuff. He's like, just use Google Drive. And I'll be honest, it's really saved my bacon because you're so used to working on one computer and one set of parameters that you forget that you're not really so much even saving stuff on that computer anymore, and that you can port your whole between Dropbox and Google Drive and any other shareable products that you use. You can pretty much port everything everywhere you go with reasonable amount of security, although I'm sure David Brooks would be like, yeah, and so, my biggest problem in Windows was that I still don't know what any of the commands or functions are called when they go wrong to fix, like what you would call system preferences in Mac. I couldn't even tell you what that's called in Windows, even though I look at it every day. So a guy named that Charlie dude wrote in and suggested I use God mode, which is a special folder that houses all the Windows system tools. And I'll include this PC World article that he sent me on how to do it, but obviously it's pretty simple because I did it. And it is super helpful to have this folder right on my desktop that I can just scroll through to figure out what the equivalent is of the sound icon in the Mac, which it's also sound, but it's slightly different. So it was really helpful. I also just wanted to finally share a lovely note that I got from Jane Roberts talking about last month. I enjoyed this segment and hearing about both your computers' histories. And she said, WordPerfect 5.1, lol F12 to reveal codes. I still remember.
Can I jump
Yep,
in real quick
please,
and say
please.
that actually is kind of how I got my start as a web developer. Was
Oh.
I would use WordPerfect and do a view source to get the document to look right, and then HTML came along, and I go, oh, this is kind of the same.
Oh,
And 20 years later, I'm still doing it.
That's incredible. And she said the way she finds stuff in Windows 7.10 is to click the magnifying glass and search for like snip if I was looking for the snipping tool, and it will autocomplete, which I have then since started to do. And she said, and I'm just going to share this because I totally agree. She said, I miss you daily, but I totally understand. No guilt. Just wanted to let you know you're missed. And what I wrote her back was, I miss me daily too, which is is my great pleasure and privilege to have been able to spend all afternoons with Tom and Roger and all of our contributors. And while I'm having a great time at my new job, I do miss hanging out in the post show all the time. So there you have it. We now have a basic framework and template for how normies can talk to devs, to IT pros, to backend, to security engineers, and all of their ilk. If you have stuff that you would like to contribute that you did not hear on this show, write us at feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. That's feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. There's always a link somewhere on that site, dailytechnewsshow.com. Make sure to put the word normie, which you can spell any way you want, but Normie is the way I've been spelling it, in the subject so Tom can either read it or not read it as he wishes. And I will try to implement as many of them as I can in my daily life and then report back in next month's Daily Tech Normie show. So I guess all that is left to do is to super thank the Davids of Devville. David Brooks and David Still, two very smart guys who took the time on a Tuesday evening to come and talk to me about
Or a Wednesday.
Or a Wednesday. See, like I can't even get the date right. That's how I'm going. On a Wednesday, coming out on a Thursday, to explain to me a little bit about their world and how it works, so that I may be kind and thoughtful to the devs in my life. So David, let's see, I'm going to pick a David Still. What is the thing you've been most proud to develop in your illustrious career?
I loved working at Atom.com, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with it or don't remember it, it has since passed on in the great ether, but it was sort of a Funny or Die type of site. Right. And I actually have a degree in theater.
Oh,
nice.
Believe it or not. And so that was that site's always been near and dear to my heart.
Okay, and where can people find you on Twitter or wherever you are to be found?
I can be found on Twitter at StealthDave, StealthDave.
Excellent. All right, David Brooks, we didn't know you before this podcast started. Your brother sent us to you, and he did a fine, fine job. What's the best thing you have ever developed that you're most proud of?
I would say actually the bioinformatics stuff, because a lot of the different things I've done for various jobs have been technically challenging, professionally rewarding, and things like that. But when I think about the science, when I think about actually improving the world, when I think about changing, and pushing the science forward just a little bit, I feel, kind of teensy bit proud of that work we're doing.
That's awesome. And where can people find you?
I'm actually not very active in Twitter or anywhere else. I used to be. I would never look up from my phone, no matter where I was, and I did the weird thing of going back to looking at the real world sometimes. I live in a computer 10 hours a day, and I figure that a couple of minutes I'm away from my computer, I should actually interact with the real world.
That's so grown up of you. I wish I could be as grown up as you.
It's called looking at cyber addiction and trying to do something about it.
Well, that is fair and wise, and I will try to follow in your footsteps. So there you have it, folks. You just got to kind of be in the know to find David Brooks. Well, thank you both so much. This was so much fun, and I hope we get to have you back sometime, too, for part 2, the game where we build funny money Fallout.
That sounds like a nice jive of games right there.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Can we have that by next Thursday?
Right, yeah, next Thursday. Bring it on, and I'll take all the credit.
And Bethesda won't sue us at all.
That's right. That's right. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. You can always call us and leave a voicemail message at 512-59-DAILY. That's 512-593-2459. And you can catch the actual Daily Tech News Show with Tom Merritt and contributors Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern at Alpha Geek Radio and Diamond Club TV. And, of course, you can find everything at dailytechnewsshow.com. Thank you all so much. It was a real pleasure, and we'll talk to you next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast.